With the discussion of wireless technologies, what we see is that we can enable one or more devices to be able to communicate without having a physical connection. That's why it's wireless. We use radio frequency transmissions through the free space, the open air, as a means of transmitting data. Now, when we go to a wireless network, or when going to it, it introduces a new set of elements that we should be looking at, such as do we need anything special to make existing applications work? Any type of retrofit, like getting a wireless network interface. And of course, there's also new risks that are a part of the wireless networks. Now, we also know there are 4 ways we can basically look at the way in which we can use wireless. Believe it or not, we can use them not only in the local area networks, the LANs, but in the wide area networks, the WANs. We also have a wide area PANs and ad hoc. When we talk about the wireless wide area network, what we're looking at is a process of being able to get into large geographical areas to share connectivity. Hey, we do that all the time. It's called cellular technology. Those connections are using radio frequencies on the 2G, 3G, 4G networks, GSM networks. So it's literally wherever there's a tower, right, we have this wireless type of network. It doesn't mean that I'm sending a wireless signal literally by itself across the world, but through wireless technology I can connect around the world. The wireless local area network is something also a lot of us are familiar with. It allowed us greater flexibility and portability than having a wired local area network, again using radio frequency. Now, in a wireless LAN, that's basically, you at home, right? If you have a wireless access point, you've got a wireless LAN. And that's one of the components you needed. It was an access point. And an access point's job was to connect the wireless portion to the wired portion of the network. We could have also used a wireless networking hub. And whatever client we're using to make the connections needed a wireless network adapter. The IEEE standards for wireless continues to grow and evolve. We started off originally with 802.11a and b. Now, 802.11b was the more popular, and the reason why is that it operated at a 2.4 megahertz frequency, which was considered the junk band frequency. It was an unregulated frequency from that the FCC didn't care what you did with it. We also called it the ISM, the industrial, scientific, and medical bands, because their wireless devices would operate again in this unlicensed frequency space. It allowed us speeds up to about 11 megabits per second, limited range. A operated actually in the 5.0 megahertz band and gave us bandwidth capabilities up to 54 megabits per second. So it was, in many ways, it even had more channels to use. So it was superior in most every way to B except for one, cost. Because the 2.4 was so easy to use as a junk band, I mean everything, your cellular phones, your microwave emits at that frequency, just had a lot more power inside to cook things. Your cordless telephones had been moving to this frequency band. So everything was there. It was cheap, it was easy, and highly available. A was not. Then we got to the 802.11g. Now, G uses the same frequency as B. It gave us speeds up to 54 megabits per second, but it changed the way in which it actually transmitted the information. We had a couple of different methods in which we were able to transmit the data and found a better way. We had the 802.11i, which began to introduce a bunch of security protocols, where we started seeing things like WAP and WPA, WPA2, and those types of things. And then we saw a big improvement in capability with the 802.11n network. It wasn't until very long ago that it was actually a standard. But 802.11n gave us speeds well above 100 megabits per second and had almost a 3-fold increase in area that it could cover. We also had another one that operated at 2.4 gigahertz, or megahertz, I'm sorry. That's Bluetooth. Bluetooth just was at a lot lower power, had a lot less range that it could use, but that was another type of a wireless network. As far as security went, there were a number of means, because by itself it is radio frequency. And unless you had some sort of directional antenna, you would basically emit your signal in a 360-degree area. You're broadcasting, and anybody with a radio could intercept and listen to your communications. I know, we do this all the time as demonstrations in our wireless hacking classes. So what we had to do is find a way to protect ourselves, and encryption was a way to do that. The first one they used was WEP, W-E-P, what they call the Wired Equivalent Privacy. Now, WEP was a good idea for a very short while. They didn't really have it, I think, evaluated as well as it could have been. They used a very low-key encryption at first. That was, didn't take long to break. And they had some flaws. The way in which they sent these initialization vectors to begin the encryption. And if I captured enough of those IVs, initialization vectors, it wouldn't take me long to be able to crack your password. In today's world, it's like 10 minutes to crack it, even with the longer keys. So they got a little better. They got into a more improved, they got into the Wi-Fi protected access, what we call the WPA, and improvements on top of that with WPA2. They improved the way in which they exchanged the encryption information, temporal keys. They got into longer and better encryption algorithms like AES for security. And so it's really a big improvement on how secure it is. And with the right types of configurations, you can make your wireless nearly as safe as your wired. Now, as I said, WEP used a symmetric encryption. That meant a private key, same key to encrypt, decrypt. And the weakness was the key reuse problem, along with other flaws, as I've already mentioned with the IVs. Now, it is not considered at all strong security control, and really, it's a warm, fuzzy feeling if you decide to use it. So that's something you look for when you're auditing. The WPA used public key cryptography, considered a much more secure option, because the keys that lock are not the keys that unlock. You have to have two sets of keys, and it's just a better overall protocol. WAP stands for the Wireless Application Protocol, and it was a general term that was described to a multi-layered protocol and related technologies that were able to bring internet content to wireless mobile devices. And there, your examples would be the PDAs and cellular technologies. So what are the risks of wireless communication? Well, it's radio waves, radio frequency. Anybody with a radio can intercept your information. It could be sensitive. You could lose or have theft of the devices that are involved in the communications. They could be misused. In fact, I could even use my access point to attack yours. It's really kind of cool, and we actually do that on purpose. We have, when we look at the wireless LAN controllers, they have settings that say if you find a rogue access point, that it actually turns your access points into little targets or missiles of radio frequency to try to bombard that thing and get it offline. Or if anybody connected to it, right, to make sure they're not staying on there. So it's kind of a cool little game you can play, almost like a little video game. Anyway, loss of the data that might be contained in the device. Well, wireless. If I've got a cell phone, right, I could lose that. You could steal it. You could take the data from it. If I'm using a cell phone, they certainly can cause distractions. See people running into tables, driving with those things. We don't even know the possible health effects about the device use. We still have to deal with how do we authenticate the users? How do we keep files secure? Do I use web security encryption, which we know is already a liability? You shouldn't. Interoperability, to be able to have multiple devices talk to each other. We have to worry about the use of wireless subnets. And what else is using that same frequency, and dealing with translation points. I mean, these are all some of the risks that we have to look at and have to analyze as we're making our evaluations.